The reaction to two controversial comedy specials over the Christmas holidays has shown that the dreaded culture wars are going nowhere in 2024. The latest Ricky Gervais special, Armageddon, and David Chappelle's The Dreamer have topped the Netflix charts, but also caused a furious backlash from critics. Here's a clip from both.
I've been doing a lot of video messages recently for terminally ill children. You know the charity Make-A-Wish Foundation? They're great, and they give these dying kids their, one wish. And if it's me, I always say yes, and I always start the video the same way. I go, "Why didn't you wish to get better?" What, you retarded as well?
I ain't doing trans jokes no more. You know what I'm gonna do tonight? Tonight, I'm doing your own handicap jokes. Well, they're not as organized as the gays. And I love punching down.
One critic labelled Gervais' special tiresome adolescence offence mongering, while civil rights advocacy group the National Black Justice Coalition called on Netflix to remove the Chappelle special from their catalogue altogether. So, should comedy always punch up rather than down, or are comedians free to say whatever they want, even if it offends? Joining me now are commentator and YouTuber Dave Rubin, comedian James Barr, and here in the studio, Talk TV contributor Paula Roan Adrian. Thank you all for being with me. Let me start with you, Dave Rubin, over in Miami. Do you think this is a case of sort of crossing the line, or is everything fair game in comedy?
Well, of course, everything's fair game, and it's the job of a good comic to get as close to that line as you possibly can, say something true, and then through humor, allow people to laugh at it. And when you poke fun at different groups, what you're doing is showing everybody that we're all equal parts of society. Chappelle and Gervais are two of probably the top 10 comics of all time, but you need only look at a comedy legend, a guy like Don Rickles, who used to walk up in front of the crowd in any part of any country and say, "Look at the black guy, the Jew, the gay guy, the Italian, the WASP, the rest of it." And what it did was everybody realized they were in on the joke, that we are a multicultural society. And if we can all poke fun at our silly stereotypes and everything else, then we will actually figure out ways to build bridges. But everybody these days seems to want to burn those bridges down and make it seem that our skin color and our religion is the most important thing about us.
James, over there in Chicago, where do you stand on this? These two comedians, funny or foul?
It's so funny that you accidentally called him David Chapelle just now, but really, he's so obsessed with trans people, I think his name should be Davina, because clearly he wants to transition himself. I mean, he is absolutely obsessed. Listen, Dave Chappelle and Ricky Gervais are both incredible comedians. They have historically been brilliant. Afterlife is great. Dave has used his comedy to punch up by attacking oppression, bringing a light to racism, joking about why he doesn't call the police. So he knows how to use comedy to point out oppression and punch up. He's holding people accountable. So why now is he punching down? In my opinion, I think Dave Chappelle has cheapened his act.
Paula, here in the studio, Ricky Gervais said today he's playing a character when he's on stage. Do you agree with that? Do you buy it?
No, I don't. And I have to say, it is disappointing because for somebody who is so intelligent, so erudite, knows the power of language, the power of words, to have become so basic and simplistic in his comedy is disappointing. And it is basic and simplistic. And if you're talking about building bridges, if you're talking about bringing communities together, how is it that you are basically poking your finger at one particular community? And when you talk about, making fun of sick children, of dying children, I just wonder how desperate you have to be to do that. And we've got there's been a poll now that's just been commenced, I think, by a mother whose son sadly had cancer, but I think is now better. And it's over 13,500 people who have signed up to her poll to hopefully get that joke removed from Netflix. And I can understand why she's doing that.
Dave Rubin, it raises this question of whether there are or should be...
I don't know about the...
Oh, God. Are there any taboos in comedy? I mean, I thought when watching, certainly the Ricky Gervais one, I did think slightly, it kind of felt a bit like, gosh, you're choosing really low-hanging fruit to sort of hit against here? You know, I mean, but it seems because this is the most popular show on, both these shows are the most popular shows on Netflix, there's clearly a huge audience for it, whether people find it funny or offensive or not.
Well, look, the audience in that room found it funny, and those are the people who were buying tickets to Ricky Gervais. So we can all whittle down whether we think that specific joke, you know, I don't think he was making fun of the sick kids per se. He was making fun of the absurdity that someone like him would be on a Make-A-Wish list. That's what the joke really was about. I don't think, and I don't think anyone on this panel thinks honestly that Ricky Gervais has some grudge against sick kids at all. And as for Chappelle talking about trans people, first off, you know, if we're going to do this based on oppression, who you're allowed to talk about based on perceived oppression, are we only allowed to make jokes about straight white Christians who are wealthy? Is that what comedy really is? I don't think so, and I don't think anyone else really thinks so either. Comedy, again, is the great equalizer. So if you're just going to decide, okay, we can make fun of these people, but not fun of these people, you're going to have an awful lot of angry people at the end of the day.
You know, I would accept that. I would wholeheartedly accept that, because no, I don't believe Ricky Gervais thinks that sick children are a cheap joke. And I don't think actually that Dave Chapelle, and we've seen him on Instagram attempting to pull back from the comments that he's made. So, you know, I fully accept that. And that's why I'm saying, first of all, it's a cheap shot. And when Dave Chapelle is quoted as saying that, you know, comedians have it's their duty to be reckless, this is where I disagree, and this is where we need to look at responsibility. It's not a comedian's job, actually, to be reckless. It's a comedian's job to be funny. And if they're going to do politics, if they're going to do about marginalised groups, then come on, be intelligent about it. Make us think. Don't do cheap school playground antics.
James, you know, all of comedy, James, doesn't it? It's all about transgression to some extent. Comedians do have a larger bandwidth than other people in society to say edgy things. But do you think, where are the boundaries in your view?
Listen, I think it is a form of activism, and I do agree with both Paula and Dave here. Like, it is such a nuanced conversation, but really it is at its best when it's a weapon against the powerful. And Ricky Gervais laughing at disabled kids, it's a waste of bandwidth. It's a waste of an opportunity to say something important. And he says he's a free speech activist, but he has a joke about the N-word, and he doesn't say the N-word. So you either are a free speech activist or you're being a pussy. Like, which is it?
Well, that's very interesting. I mentioned earlier, so producers, you know, that some people are saying in pieces about the Gervais special, they're saying the R word. And I said, look, I mean, we've already got the N word, and everyone does know what that means. But if you then got the R word that you're not meant to say as well, we're going to get a whole alphabet of A word, B word, C words that aren't meant to be said. Dave Rubin, are there any words you wouldn't say?
Well, in that you're the guest host of today's show, and maybe you want to return, I'm not going to say them right now. But look, within context, could you say the N-word within a certain context and say it not to be racist? Of course you could, if you were discussing historical reasons why people said it, or if you were making fun of people that use language like that. But this constant push for any time a comedian, if we're all basically, I think we're all agreeing here that these guys are pretty damn funny. So maybe there's a little low-hanging fruit here or there, or maybe one joke misses. That is the challenge of a great comic, that you are going to spend an awful lot of time in a bunch of really crappy clubs night after night perfecting that hour set so that you can get it on Netflix. And it is possible that one joke may fall flat. And that is the risk that you are going to have to take. Douglas, I'll text you some of those words. I just don't want to put it on television.
I don't want to text for those words. I don't incriminate it in your foul play, Rubin. Look, I mean, what's interesting, by the way, about this was that Ricky Gervais, as James says, doesn't say the N-word. He refers to the N-word, but the Chappelle special has almost nothing but the N-word in it. I mean, I was sort of a little bit bruised by just hearing it constantly. I mean, I think Chappelle's the greatest comic on the planet, but it is a little bit sort of wearying.
Wow, I don't know about greatest comic on this planet. I accept that he has done amazing things and made amazing strides in terms of comedy for people of colour. You being uncomfortable about him using the N-word, I'm uncomfortable about lots of people who use the N-word. There is a context, I agree. It's a poetic context, it's an artistic context. Do I think that Dave Chapelle is an artist? No, I don't. And especially when he says, as I said, to be reckless is his duty. That's disappointing.
Well, Paula in the studio and comedians, Dave and James over there in America, thank you all for joining us tonight.